Hello and welcome to episode 203 of the Strettycast. This week we'll dig deeper into the preseason action, from a 2-0 win over Rangers to Erik Ten Hag's 29-man squad heading to the United States. We've got it all covered. Leny Yoro is a Red and Casemiro is likely to remain. That and more on the Strettycast. I'm delighted to be joined, as per usual, by my co-host, Brian. Brian, how are you keeping since we last talked? I believe you had a busy weekend of golf.
I've been trying my best to get better at golf, and I've been failing absolutely miserably at it. But I've been just quietly starting to build a little bit of excitement that the new season is getting slowly upon us. Just starting to look at fixtures, a couple of flights booked, a couple of games planned, and eyeballing them European aways, which we have 4 of before Christmas. They're trying to ruin me financially, the bastards. But just getting back to that stage where football's almost back in our life. It's not too far away. So the summer we usually spend reading transfer nonsense and rumours and links to this fella and 400 players are coming to the club. All that is nearly put aside and we're almost back to football again. Thank God.
Speaking of golf, just sticking with that, quick one. How are you perceived on the golf course? Are you this guy that you come across on the podcast always taking the piss, or do you have an alter ego?
I don't know if you follow golf or not, but if I was to liken myself to any golfer, obviously not ability wise, but probably Tyrrell Hatton, capable of an absolute monumental blow up, definitely heart in the sleeve, says it how it is, probably doesn't behave specifically how you should etiquette wise in a golf course, and very, very capable of snapping the club in half when things go wrong. But I do try my best to keep the temper in check, but it's always simmering under there. Mostly because Dale, because I'm shite at golf, which is hard to take, and I'm on the verge of flipping the whole time. But I try my best to behave myself.
I can just imagine you sat there or stood there dressed like Ian Poulter with the nice pants.
I'm not sure I can pull off that look, but like Pulse, he's a unique individual who can have some very drastic wardrobe changes. I try and keep it low key because you don't want to stand out in a golf course if you're absolutely terrible.
You
You
should,
want to
yeah.
you want to try blend in and just get on with it. So yeah.
Is it
Although
is it the only sport where it's kind of acceptable, where fans, show up to the events actually dressed like they're going to take part in it?
yeah, it's kind of weird. And there's also this like accepted thing, mostly in America to be fair, where like the celebrity or the top pro hits his tee shot and someone just roars, lately Hawk Tua. It's mental. Very much an American thing, but sticking with the whole golf thing. Since you touched on my behaviour, I'm currently, I would say, on the verge of being banned from my local golf club. If I was to guess at what's going to come, because I received a threatening and scolding letter in the door of my house recently, telling me that if I continued with a certain thing, I'd be viewed in a disciplinary manner.
Are
It's
you
told,
shouting the Hawk Tua at people passing by?
to be honest with you, I'm the victim of. I'm an innocent victim. The guy who was with me, who was also brought up for it, it's mostly because they don't like that fella, and I just got caught in the crossfire. But when I got that letter to the house, took it very personally. Ended up meeting the guy randomly in a local hardware shop. I mean, he was pointed out to me by another fella, and let's just say we had a very, very colourful conversation. So my future of golf is it's on the balance.
You won't be sharing any putters anytime soon.
No, absolutely not.
Anyway, moving on to, I suppose, reasons why people are tuning into the podcast this week. The big news that we have to react to is the signing of Leny Yoro from Lille. The 18-year-old centre-back joins Manchester United in a big money transfer. But Ryan, it's a deal that sees United fight off interest from Real Madrid. It was known that Yoro was on their target list. Now, they didn't make an offer, but United got in quick, got the deal done, and he's now a Manchester United player. He's young, and we can't proclaim to have seen a lot of him. But are you excited about, I suppose, what you're hearing from people within the game, what they're saying about this kid?
What I'm mostly excited about, Dale, is It's one of the first signs we've seen of the new regime behind the scenes, trying to change the landscape on the transfer windows, trying to change the kind of identity of players that we're going for. Typically, before this, we'd probably have gone for Leny Yoro in about 10 years' time, when he's just kind of coming to the twilight of his career, giving Madrid a hefty fee and giving him a load of money to get him. It's kind of what we become used to. Like Ed Woodward once said, people, or we can do things in the market people can only dream of, or whatever way he put it, which put a fucking target in our back, might I add. But this was the first sign of this guy is wanted by Madrid. He's unbelievably highly rated in football. Madrid obviously want him because he's the kind of talent that they would take on at an early stage and nurture and bring him through. They'd bring him on to be the player that he can be. But we got in there first. We managed to get in and take him before Madrid got the best years out of him, and then they flog him to us. That one and the Xerxes transfer, the way it was dealt with, the speed, the fact that when it was announced first, within like 24 or 48 hours, sign, seal, delivered, job done. And what Leny Yoro has said subsequently, I know there's obviously the whole PR drive thing behind it, but some of the statements he's made, if he didn't feel the way he felt, he might be uncomfortable saying them. He's come out and said Old Trafford's the best stadium in the world, Man United are the biggest club, all this kind of thing. He said he'd die for the club on the pitch. He's hit the nail on the head on the tone of his entrance to the club. To me, he's a massive statement signing. And I think it might give us a little bit of optimism for the future that maybe things are going to change. Maybe we're not going to go for these, no harm to him, a Christian Eriksen free signing, a last minute Marwan Fellaini, an Angel Di Maria type signing. Maybe the days are changing where instead of going for that, we're signing young, up and coming talent, some on the verge of becoming a very good player, some maybe a little bit before that. But it looks like we're building a long term plan, players that we can plan on being together and growing together for hypothetically the next decade. So I'm excited.
So far, I think this is what you're touching on. Is it feels, and I'm very much and always have been in the Erik Ten Hag camp. Wanting him to remain manager and to get his contract and whatnot, and to get this third season to have a go. But I think what we're seeing from this type of business, is that the squad is improving, and no matter who will be in charge a year on from now, it should be in a stronger state than what it previously was. And we previously had situations where new managers coming in and starting off fresh and starting off new, but with the profile of players that were not just signed, but what we're going for, all kind of around 24 or younger, that is building for the future. And any future manager that is to come in, if it's not Ten Hag, will look at these guys and say, yeah, I want to work with them. Of course you would. Everyone wanted Leny Yoro and Xerxes as well is a player that I think, again, we can't prevent to know too much about him, but quite clearly a talented footballer with lots of attributes that has a high ceiling to be a really good player. And I think we have to be realistic that we're not in the Champions League. We can't really go out and buy the finished article, because the big red flag is, if you can, he's coming to you for the wrong reasons. He's coming to you for your money. We need to be buying players that have potential to get better and better, to grow with us, to grow from us being a Europa League team to us being a Champions League team.
Actually, an interesting point you brought up about hypothetically, if Ten Hag does leave and another manager comes in, he's not working with players that were specifically bought for a system that were the finished article, or that they're in their prime or they're coming to the end of it. He's still working with players that can be molded to a plan or to a system, players that will enter their prime in a couple of years' time and who will have been around the same dressing room with each other for a couple of years. They'll get to know each other. Like the best football teams, there's a bit of cohesion. There's that kind of instant knowledge. You already know where he's going to be before you look for the pass. It's optimistic if you're building that way. You're trying to build for a future where you're signing young talent early, letting them come in, letting them grow at the club, letting them get to know what the club's about, letting them get their knowledge and their information about what kind of club they're joining, getting to know their counterparts on the rest of the field. But again, if the manager should happen to change, you're not stuck with a load of 28, 30-year-old stubborn fuckers who don't want to play for him, or I don't want to change my position, or I don't want to try this style of system. You're working with young lads who will be willing to just they'll mold themselves or they're changing themselves to suit the manager because they want to play football. They've obviously joined not for the money, not solely because we're Champions League. They've joined for, as you said, the right reasons. It's identifying the correct targets. It's good work in the background. It's this best in class system we put together. They're obviously trying to identify fellas for that system, for a system that can work long term and that won't rock the boat tail. I mean, we've had so much fucking drama over the last, call it 2 years. I'd imagine that's in the back of their mind too, where they're sussing out what kind of fella is this fella? Is this fella, is he potentially going to be a fucking lunatic or a gambler or is there any kind of myriad of problems that could follow him? I'd hope they're kind of keeping that at the forefront of what they're doing when they're identifying new targets as well. You just want tranquility around the football club. You don't need fucking dramas.
One of the responses from Yoro's first official interview with MUTV that I enjoyed was they were throwing some questions at him to push a bit of a PR spin, maybe talk about some former players of the club and that, which he did do willingly, Rafael Varane and Rio Ferdinand. But they asked him a question about, which players does he model his game off? Who does he look at and say, I want to be like him? And I really admired his response. He didn't play up to it. He kind of said nobody. He said, I want to be Leny Yoro. I want to do my own game and play to my strengths. And I just thought as an 18-year-old kid, he's coming for so much money, blinded by the cameras. Probably would be easy to say. I know I'd say I'd queeze on the spot and I'd say I want to be Gary Neville or something, but he didn't. He didn't play to it. He just said I want to be myself, and I thought that was admirable for a kid.
Probably Manu got asked in the summer. Phil Foden is referred to as the Stockport Iniesta. What do they call you? And he just looked and deadpan goes, Cobby. Similar mind frame, similar mindset. That's a fantastic kind of a fella to have. That character of just Cobby, just me, top class.
Just doing my thing, easy. Moving on. Well, sticking with Leny Yoro, he did make his first appearance in the pre-season win over Rangers, a 2-0 win in Murrayfield last Saturday. Brian, we don't go too much into pre-season games because we're only going to take some kind of subjects that came from it. There's no point looking at performances too deep in these kind of games that aren't competitive. But moving on from the first game, losing 1-0 to Rosenborg and people kind of having a meltdown over a defeat, United got a convincing win. It's one ticked off the list, and it's one we can be happy about. With a week that we had announcing a new signing, seeing him play on the pitch as well. There were just more positives last weekend.
Leny Yoro came in shortly after joining, looked very, very, very composed, looked like he just slotted in nicely. Take into context, he's playing in a team with a lot of young lads, and it's kind of a thrown together side. It's not going to be a side he's going to be used to playing with week in, week out in the league, but looked really good. The week before against Copenhagen, Rosenborg, it wasn't great, but look, I said it on Twitter, take all these games with a pinch of salt. Don't overreact. If we get beat or we have a shitty performance, it's not the end of the world. It's pre-season. It's no real relevance at this stage of pre-season to what we're building towards for the league. But if we win, by all means, go absolutely apeshit about we're winning the treble, possibly the quadruple. That fellow who scored the goal is the best player of all times. Just enjoy it. Treat pre-season as what it is. It's just relaxed friendlies, giving a couple of lads a few minutes, letting foreign fans from overseas see the side. Just take a deep breath and fucking let them get on with it. Don't go too in deep and too in depth with your analysis of what's happened. Just relax.
Yeah, biggest negative for me last year pre-season was the booing for Harry Maguire. I think it was one of the games. Might have happened on more occasions than that, but just no need for it. Pre-season friendly. No need for it in any game. You don't see it at Old Trafford. You don't need to see it anywhere else. But on that game against Rangers, of course, you mentioned Leny Yoro making his first appearance, and he did really well. Quite assured coming out, carrying the ball out of defence. There was one clip, which I'm sure you've seen, of a diagonal pass, and we haven't seen many of those maneuvers or transitions since the days of Rio Ferdinand. And I don't mean to get giddy. It was a pre-season game, but it was nice to see that we have a player capable of making that quick switch, because quick transitions. We have players like Garnacho and Rashford. If you provide service to those players, they're going to hurt teams. Brian, the other standout player, especially in that first half alongside Yoro, was Amad Diallo. Scored the opening goal before the end of that first half. He's a player that we've seen glimpses of last season. I'd argue that on more occasions than not, we would have come away from games that he appeared in saying, I like the look of him. I'd like to see more of him. Ten Hag laid out a challenge to him, demands that this year is the year he stands up. You think this is the year of Ahmad? Is this the year we're going to see more of him?
Last season, a lot of people were kind of asking, why is he not getting his chance? Why is he not getting into the side? Why is he not getting minutes? It looks like Ten Hag has kind of managed him in a way that he feels fit. This is how I need to manage this guy. This is how I'm going to let him break into the team. He's kind of brought him in slowly but surely, and all of a sudden, bang, gauntlet thrown down. This is your season. This is it. He set the challenge very early in pre-season. You have to make your mark. This is the season where you step in. It's going to give us a very interesting and give Ten Hag a very interesting headache of how we fit all these lads in the side, because Amad Diallo, Alejandro Garnacho, Marcus Rashford, potentially fucking Jadon Sancho, and God, I don't know how Anthony gets back in this side. You've got to keep all these players happy. You've got to find a place from, you've got to manage minutes. With Diallo added into the fray, and I think he should be added into the fray 100%. He's a fellow I didn't really know. I won't say I didn't know too much about him. I didn't think too much about him when he was coming up for the last while. I didn't know, was he going to be physical enough? Was his stature going to stand against him? Was he able to step up in the Premier League? He's kind of shown every time he's played for us. He's well capable. He's well able to get stuck in, well capable of mixing it up with fellas. He kind of does look like he belongs there. He's been impressive the few times I've watched him. So
But
it'll
this
be
is
interesting
what
to
I
see.
wanted to touch on with you, Brian. With Anthony and Sancho, what we've seen of them in Manchester United shirts. Would it not be a strong argument to say that Ahmad has showed more in the glimpses that we've seen that he's worthy of a place in the team?
Absolutely, yeah,
I,
100%.
I, I think when he's performed, he hasn't got many chances. He always puts a shift in. You always see him busting the bollocks. He's clearly, maybe he's not carrying out all the instructions the manager wants, because we didn't see a lot of him last season. But when I look at he came in with Palestri, and he was given opportunities at the start of last season. I'll be honest, look, he clearly has impressed on the international stage. He's a regular with Uruguay. But when I see him play with United, I didn't see that spark. I just seen a player that is nowhere near this level. The glimpse I see from Ahmad, he's a world apart. World apart. That game against Coventry in the semi-final of the cup last season, he came on, he made a difference.
It's a great comparison that you mentioned Pellistri, because when you brought the question up, the first thing that jumped out at me is compare the two, Pellistri and Ahmad, when they did get their chance, and Pellistri did get a stronger chance than Ahmad. Pellistri never looked like he was going to make it. Not that he's going to make it, but he just didn't do anything that gave you that big confidence. This guy can change a game. This guy can do this or that. Ahmed's come in. He's so direct. His mindset is always positive, aggressive, attacking minded. Really exciting. And there's been games where he's played where you've literally looked and gone, he's the most likely to cause damage to the opposition. He's the most likely to do something or create that little spark. Comparing him like for like with Pellistri, when you talk about fellas coming in taking their chances, Pellistri hasn't. Ahmad has. And this challenge that Ten Hag has set out for him, it intrigues me because there's a lot of variables on who plays where, how do you fit these guys in. I think he's going to give Jadon Sancho and Anthony a very, very long season of trying to get past him, past Garnacho, past Rashford, to try to get to the team. So it's an interesting situation for Ten Hag.
It's an interesting one that could get more interesting over the course of the preseason tour, because it could end up boiling down to three. And I think Garnacho is in the team. Based on last season, there's question marks over Marcus Rashford, because he also has to come back and get back amongst the goals and contributing positively. And then if he doesn't do that, well, then there will be an opportunity for maybe Ahmad to step in. The other two that we spoke about, Sancho and Anthony, to be honest, I don't see a way for them back into the team consistently. And I know Anthony cost a lot, but his performances last season were poor. I would probably be willing to accept giving him a chance in a third season had he not behaved like an absolute fucking child on occasions last season when he was asked to carry out duties and pulling strops. And considering he's one of the ones that should be a Ten Hag lad that he brought in from Ajax, the fact that he was behaving like that, I'd honestly wash the floor with him. I'd get rid of him straight away. You can't trust people like that. In the second half, Brian, it wasn't as, I suppose, easy on the eye. Ten Hag made a number of changes. Onana did stay in goal for 90 minutes though, but there was lots of young players brought in. The goal scorer, Joe Ugle, finished brilliantly in the second half to make it 2-0. He's a player that won't be going to the US though, Brian, because he's going on loan. Do you think we need to sign a striker if we let go another one of the young players, because we're not really well stocked in that department, even though we've added Xerxes to the squad this summer?
It's one of the areas in the side where we're very lightweight in the options and not a whole pile to think this guy could come in and do a job. Hugel has there was a bit of talk about Hugel, but he hasn't really grabbed his chance. He hasn't really set the floor alight anywhere. The fact he's not going on tour and he's going on loan probably suggests that he's not in the immediate plans, obviously. I don't know if he's in the long-term plans. I think we probably are a bit stuck for another striker, but I can't see us going into the transfer market and going again for another striker. Maybe that striker has to come up through the ranks. So maybe there's an opening for a young lad in the academy over the next 12, 18 months. Put a little bit of a claim in for a stake and try become that one player that Ten Hag wants to bring in every season.
Well, that's why I think it's a bit of a shame that Ugel's not going on tour. I know it's understood that he'd be joining Wigan on a season-long loan, and that deal is obviously, it's started, negotiations are underway, and that's why they're not going to waste time by sending him to the US. And I get that. But the thing about preseason is guys going on tour and playing in front of Ten Hag and the coaching staff. I just think with these positions that, we might need a bit of covering up front, left back, full back, whatever. It's an opportunity for them to really kind of stand up and stake that claim. Now, look, in the long term, it's better for him to go to League One and play regular football throughout next season, and maybe he can come back a better player. What I will say about him, and one of the Stretty News writers reminded me of it this week, Fabiola, is I mentioned recently that whenever I've watched Joe Ugle, even in the U team or in the whatever, when he plays on pre-season and friendlies, he always tends to score. So if he keeps that up, we'll have to bring him back. He might be somewhat useful. But yeah, we got the 2-0 win against Rangers. So 1 win and 1 defeat from the 2 pre-season games so far. United now go to the US, where they will play 3 games. The first against Arsenal, Real Betis, and then Liverpool before returning for the Community Shield against Man City. Brian, Ten Hag has mentioned his 29-man squad, not containing Malacia and, like we mentioned, Ugle, but it does contain Yoro. Xerxes is not mentioned, but may join at a later date depending on when he returns. No real surprises, but the big talking point is Malacia. What is happening there? What are we going to do at left back?
There has to be something strange happening in that situation that we're not being told, because Malacia came in relatively small money, all of a sudden just absolutely disappears out of nowhere, and he's gone. He hasn't been seen for so long. It was an ongoing joke that he was actually fucking dead. So Malacia's situation is very, very strange. He comes back and he's seen coming back to the training ground, but yet he's not going on tour. And we're light in the left back situation. Very, very strange one, Dale. Conspiracy theorists like Matt Letizia would have a field day with this.
Yeah, I just think, especially given that he had the whole year off last season, and before the FA Cup final, he was back at Carrington with the team. So why now all of a sudden? Is the recovery that bad? No, it seems a bit excessive. I don't know. I think there's something else. I think it might be not that big. It might be even just a decision has been made that he'll be finding a new club or something. I find it very strange. Now, look, players do recover and players don't go on pre-season, but it just feels like we've been played along here and for some time, and there's no real clarity as to what the fuck is going on with Malacia. And it doesn't help that our primary left back, Luke Shaw, will miss a lot of preseason, but his track record with injuries is far from ideal. So we're going to the US without a recognised senior left back. We do need to sign one.
Absolutely, we need to sign one. Left back's been crying out for an addition for quite a while. Obviously, the Malacia, that kind of whole situation added to the conundrum. We brought a lad in, Reggie, on loan. He didn't really step up to the mark. Luke Shaw is someone we spoke about. Jesus, it must have been 6 months ago we spoke about Luke Shaw and said, the injury, do you cash in on him now? There's still kind of market value for him. Again, I probably still would. But if you sell Luke Shaw this summer, hypothetically, you've got nothing left. Like left back is literally a barren area where you're looking at that young lad Amas in the reserves. You can't go pinning your hopes on an academy kid who hasn't broke through yet. So it's an area that's screaming out for cover, even screaming out for depth if Luke Shaw does get injured. If Luke Shaw is fit, he's obviously playing fantastic left back, one of the best there is. But his injury record, it brings questions. And can you really depend on him and plan your team around the whole season where he's going to be part of this side? I think we badly, badly need to invest in a left back coming. And the last time we spoke about it, we actually talked about a clever signing someone who's going to be happy to play second fiddle, happy to deputise behind him, and good enough to come in and maybe kind of step up over time. So it's an area I think it's probably one of the key areas that we need to invest in. Definitely, yeah.
According to the Mirror tonight, they're saying United have 3 potential left-back targets, which include Feyenoord's David Hanko, former Chelsea star Marcus Alonso, and Crystal Palace fullback Tyrick Mitchell. Sorry, Tyrick Mitchell. Mitchell is one that stands out to me as a really strange one on the basis of you'd look at Wan-Bissaka and you can see why we would want to upgrade to a fullback that's better going forward. But Mitchell's not far off Wan-Bissaka in terms of being much better defensively and not being very good going forward. So that's one that would jump out to me as that I would be shocked. The others, Hanko, don't know him. And Alonso, we can all agree he is past it and would be a strange one. But maybe we can't expect everything to be solved in one summer. And they might have to fill a few holes in certain places at the end of the window because just to spread cat make most of what they have, really. Other than that, Brian, no real shocks from the squad. Obviously, Rashford was injured last week. He is back training. We've got McTominay back after Euros, and we also have Eriksen and Højlund back. So other than that, we're just waiting on some of the key lads to return, and then we'll be fully packed. Moving on, big topic this week because I think it's becoming quite clear that Casemiro is likely to stay at Manchester United. He's one of the players that we would have said at the end of last season and on earlier podcasts this summer that we expect him to move on, that we want him to move on, but that doesn't look to be the case. The Saudi Pro League clubs are cooling their interest, not willing to pay the money. So, Brian, looks like we're going to be stuck with him. What do you make of this? Because he's quite clearly a player that's over the hurdle. He's one of the highest earners at the club. But even Radcliffe is struggling to shift him.
I had kind of resigned to the fact and almost accepted that he was going to be gone this summer. I never for a second even considered that he was going to still be at the side next season. So it's a strange one because based on the fact I've always thought he was leaving, and we've kind of identified that he probably does need to leave, I just don't know how it works out because high earner, high reputation, obviously a guy who wants to play, he's going to not demand minutes, but he's going to expect to be in the side. Does him staying, does it kind of change the landscape again and mean we don't go for a centre midfielder that we probably should go for? Does it delay it until next summer? And can he actually step up and change his form with us for the last while and come in and make a big difference. Obviously, an unbelievably gifted footballer when he's on form, when he's playing well, but he hasn't been fantastic the last while to a level where we all thought he's off to Saudi and we'll cash in. It's a strange one.
Just when do you date it back to when his form started to dip? Think about this now, because it's probably longer than what most people would say.
Probably back
I
to when he got those
thought
two
after the Carabao Cup win in February was first season, he went down. It wasn't just the start of last season when he started playing poor.
when he got those 2 red cards in a row and came back. I don't think we ever saw the same Casemiro since then. Might be a bit harsh on the fella, but I genuinely don't think we did.
That's probably more accurate. Yeah, I think that's fair. But I do think we can't let the problem persist into next season. We can't ignore it. If he stays, he stays. We might have to bite the bullet. We do need to get someone in to protect that defense that can cover ground, that has the legs to do it. And obviously, one of those options could be bringing back Amrabat. And to be honest, I'd rather, some of the names are being linked to it, Ugarte, Subamendi, and I don't think we'll get Subamendi, but I think that would probably not be the best option for us, even though he's a better player than Ugarte. But not every team needs that Rodri number 6. Not every team plays that way. Madrid don't play with one. You don't have to have one of those players in your midfield. And I think my priority would be definitely getting an upgrade on Casemiro, but someone that can just sit deeper than Kobbie and let Kobbie do his thing. He needs a partner in midfield, and I think right now he doesn't have one. Casemiro last season, for someone that was experienced in midfield, that should have been leading the way and making life a bit easier for Kobbie. He did anything but.
That's why I think it shows a spanner in the works in the transfer market, because if he's staying, there's probably less likely a chance that we go out there and try buy someone to replace him while he's still in the squad. Whereas if he was to leave this summer, obviously you have to go straight into the market, add to your squad depth. You need to sign that player that can sit into the midfield. I find it very strange that he's staying. Like I don't understand it, because he hasn't set the world alight. Most of the fans kind of want him to. I won't say want him to leave, but expect him to leave. Is he staying hoping to regain form, or like what's his ambition?
I have a question for you
Go on.
in regard to Scott McTominay. So, in order for United to sign that midfielder that we're craving, right? I won't name anyone, but that midfielder we're craving, we'll say. Do you persist with Casemiro for the year, or are you willing to sacrifice Sir Scott of McTominay?
It's the question: which one of the two would I sell? Is that the way
No,
you're kind of putting it?
we're not able to sell Casemiro. He's not gone. So, do you persist with him for the following season, or in order to get a new midfielder in, would you be willing to sacrifice McTominay?
Well, I'm absolutely not. I'm not sacrificing McTominay for anybody.
Oh, come on, Brian.
McTominay is a
For
fella.
a player that's going to come in and start every week, you're not willing to sacrifice a squad player. That is
No,
sheer
because
bias.
it's not. My point on Twitter during the week: every squad needs depth. Every squad needs a player who will
Yes.
come in and do a job. You can't just sell every player that's not first team starting 11 quality. You still need lads in the background. People forget the fact that you need to have cover. If Casemiro or Main or whatever our midfield is, one of them gets injured or suspended or whatever happens, you still need someone to come off the bench. If you don't have that sitting there waiting to go, you're bollocks. If McTominay is happy to play that role, which I'm kind of getting the idea he might not be, because if there's clubs sniffing around, he might be thinking to himself, look, I can play week in, week out here. If he is happy to play that role, it's invaluable. Go back through the years, we had like your John O'Shea's, Fletcher's, Phil Neville's, Jason Parks, not comparing ability wise, but you had fellas who were happy to play their role on the side, knew their levels, knew their squad position, and stepped in when they were called on and gave a shift and did what they could do. You have to have squad depth.
Absolutely. But with all of those players you mentioned, not all of them left United or were sold at any stage, really, but they all have a price. So your Nicky Butts and your Phil Nevilles, they're all useful. But if a club is willing to come in and say, for example, in this day and age, my example would be 30 million, 35 million. If someone comes in with an offer like that for McTominay, I would sell. However, if anything below that comes in, I wouldn't sell, because last season, may not have been a starter, but was one of our most influential players, given when coming off the bench and some of the goals he scored and adding goals to his game. So you can't take that away from him. He does have a value to United, so no one can come in and lowball us with an offer. United have an asset there, but I do think 30 million, if you're talking that kind of region, I think that would be enough to say, yeah, we'll cash in.
Difference when you compare the likes of Nicky Butt and him. Nicky Butt was in a squad where there was squad depth. He existed in a squad where there already was enough quality waiting to come in and step up. We don't have that. We haven't had it for a while. And we saw last season how many times when we had injuries in certain positions, we were we were sticking fucking Amrabat left back, for God's sake. We're not at a stage where you can comfortably afford to drop out your squad depth and sell them because we got an offer, because we don't have anyone else inside in that fucking squad capable of doing that same job. If there was another 3 or 4 lads in his position that could do a similar job and act as squad depth, absolutely, you get a good offer, you let him go. He is the squad depth. We don't have that. We don't have the advantage of having enough depth in the squad that you can let someone like him go. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I think you're right. So I think if you did lose a McTominay, I think it would be important to go into the market again, not a superstar, but maybe some young prospect for the championship or whatever, 15, 20 million. You'd have to get in that kind of player to come in that's happy to do that role. He'd have to be replaced. There's no doubt about that. Moving on to the questions. Quite a few of the listeners have sent in the same questions this week, so we'll try to get through them the best way possible. The first one in from Dave Cleaver and Gaynor Hammond. So they ask, who will be the breakthrough player this season? So they're not expecting anything as prominent now as another Kobbie Mainoo, but who do you expect this year, Brian, to get some opportunities and maybe become a bit of a first team player?
If you were to believe the media reports and the talk and kind of the hype around the squad, Collier is probably the one that stands out as probably the next lad who's going to get given his chance. Looks like a good player. A lot of talk about him. Ten Hag has promised that every season he will introduce one youth player to the side, which, if you think about it long term, that's a massive claim. Because over a couple of years, that means you're going to have 4, 5, 6 lads who've come to the academy who've established themselves in a first team squad at Man United. That's not an easy thing to achieve. But Collier, the talk around Collier seems to be very positive. A lot of people believe he has the ability and the talent to step up and make it into that side. But if you add Collier, the only thing I suppose that would question it, you add Collier to that central midfield area, you've now got Kobbie Mainoo, who's just come off from the academy, and Collier, who's just come through the academy. You've got two very, very young academy kids who ideally would be more stepping into a midfield that's established and kind of learning from someone else and growing as they go. All of a sudden, they almost are your midfield. It would be a very, very brave move, but I think he's probably the guy next in line to get that chance. Yeah.
What impressed me about him against Rangers was his appearance. He's young in the face, but he's very strong. He doesn't look like a boy on the pitch. He's well able to hold his own. On the ball, probably wasn't his strongest performance, but off the ball, he was a menace. He was really, really good. And I think with these preseason games, that's why we don't go into much detail about him. I'd only be really willing to take little bits from it. And then I'd take a young fella's performance against Rangers, for example. And then when he plays against the next team, compare those weaknesses and strengths again. Is he making any progress for the staff? And that's all what these games are about. And it's about when you're answering this question and who's going to be the one to step up. It might not necessarily be the one that everyone's talking about. It could be just this kid that takes the opportunity, takes the instructions that the coaching staff give him, and they want to play him more because he's that way inclined. I think that was the case. We spoke about it, Brian, before we came on, that the coaches at United would not have identified McTominay as being a certainty for first team football when he was in the academy. Jose Mourinho gave him a chance with training with the first team and then competitive football. And we eventually seen what Mourinho saw in the kid, but I don't think everyone else did. And it could be something like that. My shout, by the way, to answer this question would be Harry Mass, based on the fact we need a left back. And I just think that's a position where a young up and coming kid could have a real go at it. Now, he has only turned 17. of March this year. He's still very young and has years on his side, but yeah, maybe you might see him in a few cup games or maybe Europa League. Why not? Why not? I think I would rather see him get chances than bring in another Sergio Reguilon. That there's no point really. Moving on. Next question, Joey Tabor and Jared Kennedy. What would be a successful season for United?
It's a difficult question to answer because you've got to consider the mindset of the person answering it. Are you pragmatic in the fact that you go, look, we finished in such and such a position last season. This is what we did last season. We try to build on that, maybe take the next step up. Or do you throw a curveball in and go, hang on a second, last season was an absolute anomaly of an injury crisis that was unheard of. We got absolutely ripped apart by injuries. Go back to the first season for Ten Hag. Very positive, big improvement, great progress straight away. So he's obviously capable of leading this side in a very, very fast manner to high standards. He got hamstrung last season with all these injuries. I reckon if he gets a lash at it this season, without the injury crisis and a couple of key personnel that we've added, they're curing problems that were obviously identified. I reckon we're very, very capable of stepping up. I'd say top three involved in the conversation late enough in the season that we don't become just an also ran. Deep cup runs, a good showing in the Europa. Maybe add one trophy out of the 3 cup competitions we're in. I'd be very, very, very happy with that.
Expectation wise, I think I would go with top 4. I think that has to be the bare minimum of what we do next season. We have to qualify for the Champions League through that route. I think we want to see our league form improve, because if we're not performing well in the league, it won't look good on Ten Hag. I think he has to show in the league that form is going to improve. Then when it comes to cup competitions, I think since he's become United manager, we've been very good in the cup competitions. You know, last season in Champions League, it was a disaster, and getting knocked out in the Europa League the year before against Seville, that was a tough one to take as well. But I do think we've become a bit of a cup team. And I don't mean that in a negative way. I mean it in a positive way, because before Ten Hag became manager, we weren't winning cups. We had gone almost 6 years without winning a piece of silverware. So the fact that he's got us back to that level, I think is a sign of improvement. And if he doesn't win a trophy this year, because he's got 2 under his belt, I don't mind. I think for me, it's just I really want to see us sort out that league form. And you mentioned 3rd place. I think that would be a really, really good finish for United, especially given that we finished 8th last season. And you have to take that into consideration of how far we're going to jump. But that would be a successful season for me, qualifying for the Champions League, but doing so through top 4. Of course, winning the trophy be successful, but it's not. We've done that twice now. I just want to see that league form improve, really. Moving on, last question from Colin NUFC on Twitter. It says, I don't trust Dalot and Shaw to be fit enough or consistent enough. Do you agree fullbacks are in desperate need of replacing? So this is a little bit different to what we spoke about before. It's not just left back. He's pinning this a bit on Dalot now. Before I jump in, that's a bit unfair. Brian, do you trust Dalot? You fully trusting of Dalot? I'm not fully there, but he deserves a bit of trust, doesn't he, after last season?
I think the question is right because obviously we discussed left back at length and we already know left back needs additions. Right back's a funny one because we went through this kind of stage where Wan-Bissaka had a purple patch. He looked brilliant. He was the first choice. Dalot was shite. Next thing Dalot came in, Dalot actually looks way better. Wan-Bissaka's shite. And it kind of flipped over and back for a while. I think we're kind of taking this. Wan-Bissaka's probably going to leave the club, or at least there's talks about it. If he potentially does leave the club, we have to go and sign a right back because Dalot's looked all right. He looked steady last season. People started buying back into the whole Dalot stock. I've never ever fully believed that Dalot is the answer at right back. I've never 100% trusted him. He's all right. He's solid enough, but I don't think he's that right back. If you're talking about building a team that gets to the next level and whatever heights you're aiming for, I don't think he's the man. I think he'd be a fantastic option would say he'd be a fantastic second option. I don't think he's the first team starting option that we need. So I definitely think we're going to have to dive into the market. Even at the moment, if you're only buying someone to cover for him and you do trust in him and you do work with him as your first choice right back, I've never ever fully 100% thought Diogo Dalot, absolutely, he's right back for us. And again, I never had the same feeling with Wan-Bissaka. I had little problems with both of them. Wan-Bissaka more so going forward. Everyone talked about his defensive capabilities, but the more you saw Wan-Bissaka, his defensive capabilities were more specific to one-on-one defending. His general defending wasn't
Quite
amazing.
poor.
Then you then you talk about Dallo going forward, and he's absolutely unreal going forward. He's not unreal going forward. He's
No.
run of the mill average. He's half decent. He's an upgrade on Wan-Bissaka because what we saw wasn't great, but he's still not at the level where you go, yeah, 100%. He's the man at right back.
I think with Dado, we're right in the middle with him right now, because there was a period, especially this time last year, where none of us would have had any reason to have any real trust in him. He was still kind of waiting to explode, waiting to become this player that Mourinho said he was going to be. In the last year, I think he was United's most or second most improved player. I think where we're coming to now is, can he actually kick on? This is where he kicks on, or where he just kind of shows that that was just a bit of a purple patch. That was just a bit of a honeymoon. And I hope it's a case of where he's improving, because if it is, I think he can become a frightening player if he can keep improving, right? Because it was seen what we seen last season from him in times. I thought he was exceptional in some games. No, not every week, but like he offers, he can cut into midfield from that fullback role, gives Ten Hag that option in a player. He's not the best in the world going forward, but he's not the worst either. And I think defensively, which is where he was kind of subject to criticism previously, I think that was an area of his game last season where he really stepped up. He still has his lapses in concentration. You can still see him maybe at a corner not following his man or whatever. That'll probably happen. But he added a bit of consistency to his game last season, I thought. And I think if he can do that again this season, we have a really good right back on our hands. But we still need backup, because if you lose Wan-Bissaka, you need someone else to come in. And the best way to go about it too, we're on about sensible boys. 15, 20 million, young fullback that realise coming to Manchester United to push that up for a spot. It's a no-brainer if you're going to sell Wan-Bissaka for 10 to 15 million. No-brainer. So yeah, I don't think you are being harsh, Colin. I think your question actually was fair on Dado, because I can't tell you that I have complete trust. The jury is still kind of out a bit, but I do think he deserves a lot of credit from last season. That's it for this week. Brian, thanks so much for joining me again.
Pleasure as always to spend 45 to 50 minutes in your company having a chat about the football club we love the most and trying to make the best of it in a summer where it can be very hard to find things to talk about, sifting through the bullshit reports that we read from this, that, and the other fella. But as I said at the start of the podcast, we're nearly back to football. We're nearly back to week in, week out. Will we go to this game? Will we fly over for that one? Bring it on. I've missed it so much after a summer of international football, which absolutely broke me.
Yeah. That was like it was like smoking CBD the Euros, so just like light version of a real hit. And I'm just waiting for that football season to come underway, and then we'll be happy again, back doing what we like doing. So Brian, like I said, thanks so much for joining. Listeners, thanks for your continued support, your questions, and of course, hit that subscribe button if you're new to the Strettycast. We record every week. We're bringing you more interviews coming up soon, and of course, when the season gets going, match day coverage. Brian, why do people, or what happens to people if they listen to this and don't subscribe?
If you don't hit that subscribe button, give it a 5-star review and do what we're asking you to do. I'm going to sneak around your house at night. I'm going to cut half of your neighbour's lawn and make you look like an absolute dick and start a lawn gate war that I've just gone through myself and won. I'm going to put you in that position. Just make the right decision. Do it. Like, subscribe, 5-star.
Brilliant. And make sure you follow the Strettycast on Twitter. And if you want to follow Brian, I know I should have asked you there, it's at DayTrippingRed. You can follow me at O'Donnell Dale. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you again next week.